Welcome to our attendees that are on and joining. We'll be getting started at 1:05, but we wanted to show you some photos from the various campaigns that led to the soda tax that we will be celebrating today. So you'll see some images scrolling through. And then we also want to do a land acknowledgement on the land that the soda taxes take place on. So before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we occupy the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. We recognize that the Ramaytush Ohlone understand the interconnectedness of all things and have maintained harmony with the nature for millennia. We honor the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples for their enduring commitment to Mother Earth. As the indigenous protectors of this land and in accordance with their traditions, the Ramaytush Ohlone have never ceded, lost, nor forgotten their responsibilities as the caretakers of this place. As well as for all peoples who reside in their traditional territory, we recognize that we benefit from living and working on their traditional homeland. As uninvited guests, we affirm their sovereign rights as First Peoples and wish to pay our respects to the Ramaytush Ohlone people and their ancestors, elders, and relatives of the community. We recognize and respectfully honor the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, and we must embrace and collaborate meaningfully to record Indigenous knowledge and how we care for San Francisco and all of its peoples. So as we continue with the presentation today, we would like you to keep in mind where you're coming in from. While we don't have the chat enabled for participants to share, we invite you to take a look at a map and figure out which Indigenous peoples' lands you are coming in from today and take a moment to acknowledge that. So please enjoy the photos of the campaigns and we will get started shortly. Welcome, everyone. We were giving folks a moment to arrive and did a land acknowledgement at the beginning of the meeting, and we'll get started at 1:05. Just giving folks a chance to log in. All right, I think we can get started. Welcome everybody to the celebration of San Francisco's soda tax, particularly the policy element and the various campaigns that led to the implementation of today's tax. So we have many panelists here that you'll hear about shortly. And we're really excited to have you all on the webinar today. It is being recorded. But first, I'd like to welcome you and welcome my co-host, Abby Cabrera. Abby, do you want to start us off with introductions and then I'll introduce myself?
Sure. Thank you, everybody, for your time today. I'm Abby Cabrera, and I am a research project manager at UCSF's Center for Excellence in Primary Care. I bring experience in public health research aimed at improving health equity and decreasing health disparities through community engagement and primary care research. I am also the current co-chair for the San Francisco Sugary Drinks Distributor Tax Advisory Committee and have served in the research medical seat since 2021. I'm a proud daughter of Filipino immigrants, was born in San Francisco and raised in the Bay Area.
Thanks, Abby. I'm Blythe Young. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Community Advocacy Director for the American Heart Association here in the Bay Area. One of the areas that I cover is San Francisco, and I also sit on Shape Up San Francisco's coalition as their co-chair for their Policy Systems Environment Action Team. I hold a BS in nutrition and dietetics and community nutrition services from UC Davis, and have dedicated my career to public health and community health, improving equity and social justice. I have advocated for soda taxes before joining the AHA as a Berkeley and Oakland resident, and am pleased to be able to support these campaigns within my professional career, upholding the recommendations of the soda tax committee and advocating for the continuation of that committee over time, which you'll hear more about later. Thank you all for being here today. So before we begin, I wanted to go over a couple of housekeeping items in terms of how the webinar will run. I mentioned earlier that this is being recorded, and the recording will live on the SFDPH website, and we'll be sure to send a follow-up email with that information on where to access the recording in case you have someone else you would like to share this with. We will be taking questions through the Q&A function of the webinar today, so please add questions in the Q&A box as they come to you, and we will address them in the Q&A portion of the webinar. And everyone else will be muted and off camera except for panelists and hosts. So our agenda today consists of context and framing for the soda tax, panel presentation from each of our presenters representing their individual areas of expertise, a Q&A portion, and closing remarks.
Effective public health interventions. We know we need strong advocates and policymakers to champion the effort. And here in San Francisco, we are lucky to have both. Today, we're honored and grateful to have 6 dynamic and instrumental panelists who represent a spectrum of expertise from on-the-ground grassroots organizing to community and physician advocates to former Sugary Drinks Distributor Tax Advisory Committee members to equity champions and policymakers. So they will speak to the history of the current soda tax, lessons learned, and some next steps to consider.
Thanks, Abby. Before we launch into our panel presentations, we wanted to talk a little bit about, why soda taxes, why we're here today. And the overarching theme of why we're here is the soda tax is about equitable communities and leveling the playing field between sugary drinks and healthier options. It's one small way to push back against the predatory industry tactics that affect the community in San Francisco and broader communities in California. A soda tax is not about shaming people for drinking soda, and it's not about shaming individuals and telling them to stop drinking soda. A soda tax is not a regressive tax and is meant to support and uplift people of color in their health. So soda tax is about health, it's about knowledge, it's about making choices, and it's about creating more equitable communities. So I want you to keep this in mind as we move forward in the panel presentations. I'd also like to say that you'll hear opinions today from the individuals on the panel, and we're here today to talk about issues and not about electeds and decision makers in particular. We're here to talk about community, and we're here to celebrate all that has happened with the San Francisco soda tax. Prior to 2014, there had been 30 attempts to pass a soda tax in the US. San Francisco alone went through many attempts that you'll hear about as we move forward in the webinar. San Francisco and Berkeley were on the ballot in November of 2014. San Francisco didn't end up passing in 2014, and you'll hear more about that from our speakers, but its final tax passed in 2016. Berkeley needed 50% plus one to pass funds going into a general fund tax, which is where all of the soda taxes in the Bay Area ended up. Although San Francisco's initial tax was intended to be passed as a special or designated tax that would put funding into a designated fund for programs versus the funding going into the general fund. So this is some sort of primer information about soda taxes as we move forward in the presentation. Also in 2016, Oakland passed Measure HH. San Francisco passed Proposition V, which is the final soda tax in San Francisco, and Albany passed a soda tax as well.
How does this all work in San Francisco? First, it's important to note that San Francisco's soda tax of 1 cent per fluid ounce fee is unique in that it is not a sales tax. It is the sugary sweetened beverage distributor that is responsible for paying the tax. And each year, about $15 to $16 million in soda tax revenue is collected. This revenue then goes into the general fund, and about 78% of this fund, which is around $11 million, is set aside for the members of the Sugary Drinks Distributor Tax Advisory Committee to make recommendations to the mayor on how to spend this revenue to support healthy communities. After receiving the advisory committee's community-driven and evidence-based recommendations, the mayor submits her allocations in a budget proposal to the Board of Supervisors. Once approved and signed, the revenue funds the multitude of programs, activities, resources, health education, structured interventions, and so much more. While there are many programs funded by the soda tax, a few include school-based oral health sealant program, distribution of food vouchers and fruits and vegetables to food insecure individuals, and more than 20 water station installations across public spaces and schools in the San Francisco Unified School District. Soda tax funding has continued to support low-income individuals of San Francisco, our children, our youth, and young adults, as well as community members who identify as Asian, Black, African American, Latinx, Native American, Indigenous, and Pacific Islander. The 16 voting members of the Tax Advisory Committee collectively spend over 900 hours per year to discuss budget recommendations, evaluate programs, and receive input from the community, resulting in submitting a balanced budget of recommendations. The soda tax is working here in San Francisco, especially for communities most impacted by chronic disease. Individuals of our city are drinking fewer sugary beverages, and the city has raised more than $50 million in soda tax revenues since 2018. And that means it is going right back into the community programs to reduce sugary drink consumption, increase access to water, and promote active living. San Francisco's commitment to respecting the community-driven recommendations of the Tax Advisory Committee has ensured that the soda tax keep working for all of us.
Great. Abby, before we move to Senator Wiener, maybe you can run through some additional information on that slide about how the tax has worked.
Yeah, I want to share that, each year when we make our recommendations, a considerable amount is recommended and then allocated by the mayor's final budget into community-based organization grants. And we also have large domains of this fund going into oral health, ways to tackle food insecurity and increase food access, those for the students and youth of our communities through programs within the San Francisco Unified School District, also in recreation and parks. One of the big programs we have in that funds peace parks, as well as Requity and some scholarships. Again, there is so much information in the last 5 years of how the soda tax is working. We'll hear a lot of it also later in the evaluation from one of our speakers. But I think the biggest message is just to know that it is going back into the community, and it's going into the communities most impacted by chronic disease of sugar.
Thanks, Abby. I'm wondering if you can share your perspective on, and this is a question that we'll ask panelists later, but as a current SDT member of some of the challenges that the committee faces.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes some of the challenges is that we wish we could have more funding to recommend to many more communities. But what we want to also make sure is we are continuing to be inclusive of community voice. And as I'll share later with some links, we welcome all of you to join in on our meetings and share your public comment, share your perspective, and share your voice. You know, as I mentioned, these are going to be community-driven recommendations. And so we need the perspectives of all of our communities to take part in this because we're all in it together. I think what's also really important is that our 16-seat Soda Tax Advisory Committee, it's comprised of individuals that represent community-based organizations from the community. It also encompasses a youth seat. So we have somebody that is right on the ground attending school in San Francisco, taking part in our committee. We also have some seats that represent different agencies of San Francisco. We have a parent seat. There are 2 that are research medical seats, people who work in chronic disease specialty, in food insecurity. So we also encourage you not just to attend the meetings, but if you're interested in having a seat in our advisory committee, we'll post the link later to our website, but encourage all of you to get involved. We're all in this fight together, and it's a committee that's truly dedicated and committed to improving the health and well-being of everybody in San Francisco. And it all starts again from the community. And I'm excited to welcome you all here today because we're going to hear many stories again of how the community was at the core and heart of our soda tax and how we are here 5 years later.
Thank you so much, Abby. I'm wondering, I know we mentioned that we would share the link later, but maybe we can drop that in the chat for folks. We will have Senator Wiener joining us, but he is not on yet and is the next portion of our panel. Oh, great. I'm hearing in the chat that he is on. So that's fantastic. We'll move ahead and we will drop that link a bit later. So I'd like to take the time right now to welcome Senator Wiener to our policy panel. We are so pleased that you are able to join us today. As a former SF supervisor of District 8, Scott Wiener worked to address the growing epidemics of type 2 diabetes and tooth decay, including links with sugary beverages, and helped lead the effort to adopt a soda tax with funds dedicated to nutrition, physical activity, and health programs. We are very pleased to welcome Senator Wiener to kick off our presentation portion of the panel and offer insights into state-level preemption, what we can celebrate from the current iteration of the tax, and where we can go from here. So at this point, I'd like to welcome Senator Wiener. It's great to have you here today.
Great, thank you so much for having me, and I want to thank everyone, this amazing coalition for what you've done, what we've been able to do to really move this issue forward. When we first started gearing up for the first soda tax campaign, that was in 2014, so it was probably in 2012, 2013 that we were gearing up. There were people who told us, oh, you have no chance, there's no way this can ever happen. And you know, we went through that first campaign in 2014, which was a 2/3 tax because we had the money dedicated to specific health related purposes. And that was such an incredibly hard fought fight. And the soda industry poured in millions against us, and we were an under-resourced campaign. And nevertheless, although we did not get 2/3, we got, I believe, in the mid to high 50s. And so it really showed the strong level of support despite misleading false opposition claims funded by millions of corporate dollars. Strong support for this idea. And then of course we came back a few years later with a 50+1 majority vote proposal, and that pretty easily won. I learned a lot during those campaigns about the tactics of the soda industry and the really inaccurate claims and misleading information that they would put out so that they could keep people addicted to these drinks that are absolutely fueling the type 2 diabetes epidemic, as well as tooth decay and other health problems. So it's great that we were able to get that passed. I know there have been some challenges and frustrations about the funding, but that is an ongoing fight, and I'm sure we'll be able to get that right eventually. At the state level, I'll be honest, while City Hall was a fairly fertile terrain for soda tax idea and other progressive public health ideas, the legislature has never been very hospitable to soda tax proposals. There have been various soda tax proposals. I think probably 2 or 3 since I've been there. They started even, I think, maybe before I got there, and they have never made it very far. We were able to pass legislation to require a warning label, or we were able to at least get close on that, and it's just been a real challenge. In terms of the preemption, as I think you know, in 2018, the Business Roundtable and funded by the soda industry in a really despicable move, qualified a nuclear constitutional amendment that would require all taxes to be 2/3. That would have been devastating for the ability of cities, school districts, and other local entities to fund basic needs. And then they came to the legislature and said, we will agree to pull this if you put a 13-year moratorium on new local soda taxes. And so the legislature was in a lose-lose situation: either do this preemption or risk blowing up municipal finances. And so the legislature, our leadership, did agree to that. I voted against it, but I'm not critical of my colleagues for voting for it, because this was a really, really potentially devastating situation. I would love to repeal that preemption, although we're already 5 years into it, so time does go by. I would like to repeal it. There was one bill that one of my colleagues introduced to repeal it. It didn't make it very far. I think there are some who view that deal as somehow binding, that we can never repeal it. I don't think that's the case, but some do. So I'm not highly optimistic we'll be able to repeal it. I do think it's worth continuing to build support for doing so, because you never know, and it's worth trying. So again, I just want to thank everyone for your hard work on this important issue, and you'll continue to have my support and collaboration.
Thank you so much, Senator Wiener. We did want to open up this time for questions. So for the participants, please enter your questions in the Q&A chat box. And while that's happening, I'm wondering if you can speak to the penalty provision that was lifted in April of this year. I think that's a really exciting development in pathway to potentially overturning preemption.
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
Yeah, I'm wondering if you can speak to the lifting of the penalty provision that was of April of 2023 in regards to the pathway to potential overturning of preemption.
Yeah, I mean, it's a step. It's a step. And I do think, since 2018, there's been a lot of turnover in the legislature. We have new leadership in the Assembly this year. Next year, we'll have new leadership in the Senate. And that's not to be in any way critical of existing leadership. We've had amazing leadership in both houses. But you have just new members of the legislature, new people in different positions. And so there's always a possibility of being able to try to get rid of the preemption. But it is, it's going to be challenging. There's no doubt about it.
Thank you so much. I'm also wondering if you can speak to the future of SSB policy at the state level. I understand that the appetite might not be there for, overturning preemption through the state pathway, but I'm wondering if there are other SSB policies on your radar.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, the warning label pathway, we've had some bad court rulings. And so that pathway seemed very fruitful for a while, but the courts have really fetishized First Amendment and corporate free speech. And so as if corporations were the same as people, which of course they're not. And so that the warning labels are not as fruitful as they used to be. For example, I passed a warning label or a warning requirement for ads in San Francisco, and that was we lost in court. So I think we should constantly be brainstorming about ideas we can bring to the legislature. And soda tax is always possible. It does require a 2/3 vote to get through the legislature. I think if it were a majority, it would be a lot more doable. 2/3 is quite hard.
Definitely. I'd like to invite any of our other panelists, if you have questions for the senator while we open up the Q&A chat box.
Hi, Senator Wiener. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Roberto Vargas. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for all your work on this.
Thank you.
So in our engagement with local communities to hear their perspectives on those policies that scientists believe to be evidence-based at reduction of sugary drink consumption, there were a couple of things community folks supported, like, for example, banning advertisements of sugary drinks near schools and playgrounds, policies like that were protective of children. What's your sense of the feasibility of policies like that at the state level or even at local levels?
I mean, that idea, it's been a while since I've focused on that particular idea. I think it's a good idea. I think politically that strikes me as something that's more feasible. I don't know about constitutional rulings that the courts have issued on that, so I can't speak to that. But in terms of the politics of it, that strikes me as an idea that's going to be probably more feasible in the legislature than a tax, politically feasible.
Thank you.
Great. I believe we have a question from Dr. John Ma. Do you want to come on video, Dr. Ma?
Senator Wiener, thank you for your amazing leadership, being an inspiration in this effort.
Thank you.
It's astounding to see 50 nations around the globe have implemented sugar drink taxes. I was wondering if any of the leaders of other nations have been in contact with you about their successes and experiences as we move forward.
They've not been in contact with me. I know when Mexico years ago passed it, I think there was some, I didn't have direct conversation, but I know our coalition had conversation with folks in Mexico. But no, I've not had communication with folks from other countries.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Nicole Cox in the chat. She asks, what is the potential for pursuit of a legal action similar to what was done with tobacco control with the master settlement agreement?
I think that's a great idea. And that would, that could be a private action. It could be from the city attorney, from the attorney general. I think it's a good idea.
Wonderful. Well, we know that you have a lot going on today, so we'll let you roll off of the call. We also know it's very late where you are. But thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for your championship of this issue, and it was wonderful having you on.
Great to see you all. Thank you all so much for your work. I'll talk to you. Bye-bye.
All right. As we continue on with our scheduled program, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. John Ma. Dr. Ma has been a consistent voice in the advocacy for soda tax efforts. He began work with the San Francisco soda tax in 2013 after the 2012 Richmond soda tax effort. On behalf of both the San Francisco Medical Society and the American Heart Association, Dr. Ma was a featured spokesperson and advocate for the Prop E campaign through press conferences, newspaper editorial meetings, city hall hearings, and opinion pieces to the media. Dr. Ma assisted Supervisors Wiener, Marr, and Cohen with legislative proposals to place a warning label about sugary drinks on city property and to limit sugary drink sales in city vending machines. He was again a featured spokesperson and appeared in the television commercials in support of Prop V in San Francisco and Measure HH in Oakland, which passed by large margins. He later served on the Sugary Drinks Distributor Tax Advisory Committee from 2019 to 2021. Dr. Ma will talk about the beginning of the soda tax. Dr. Ma, take it away.
Thank you, Abby, for your wonderful introduction. It's really an honor to be part of this panel to discuss the history and successes of the San Francisco soda tax. I remember attending a 2012 UCSF presentation about the Richmond soda tax by cardiologist and council member Jeff Ritterman. It was enlightening and illuminating, and it was the start of a 4-year journey to successfully pass the 3 soda taxes in San Francisco, Albany, and Oakland in 2016. I remember being first called by Senator Wiener's team to join him and speak at a press conference along with Supervisors Malia Cohen, Eric Marr, and David Chu in the fall of 2013 when Prop E was first unveiled. I was proud to represent the San Francisco Medical Society, and I'd like to highlight the important contributions of our 2014 San Francisco Medical Society President, Dr. Lawrence Chung, who passed in July of 2023 at the early age of 53. His passion and efforts were invaluable during the 2014 soda tax campaign. Prop E, San Francisco's first attempt at a soda tax, was hard fought, but as a special tax, it fell short despite a 55 to 45 majority at the polls in 2014. I recall gathering with the Prop E campaign on election night in Noe Valley as we watched history being made with Prop D in Berkeley succeed as a general tax, and we vowed to return in the future. Prop E had been calculated to generate approximately $30 million in tax revenue each year. The proposed legislation earmarked the funds to go directly back to health promotion that included 40% for the SF Unified School District for nutrition education, healthy food access, and the expansion and improvement of physical education, 25% to the Department of Public Health and Public Utilities Commission for healthy food access initiatives, drinking fountains, and water bottle filling stations, oral health services, chronic disease prevention, and public education. 25% would go to the Recreation and Park Department for recreation centers, organized sports, and athletic programming. And finally, 10% would be directed for grants to community-based organizations to support physical activity, food access, public outreach, and health programs. The goal was for these funds to be used only for new or expanded programs and not to replace current funding. Most importantly, the funds would be prioritized to neighborhoods that had been disproportionately impacted by the diseases related to the consumption of sugary drinks. Many of these guidelines continued in the path forward in the implementation after the passage of Prop B in 2016. You'll hear more from other panelists about how the funds have been categorized later in today's panel. With regard to forming and passing the policy, before the 2016 Prop B soda tax was placed back on the ballot, there was extensive discussion whether a general or a special tax should be attempted. The decision was ultimately made by Supervisor Malia Cohen to have this be a general tax, mirroring the proposals in Berkeley, Albany, and Oakland. To distribute this general tax, the city would create the Soda Tax Committee, charged with making recommendations to the mayor and board of supervisors regarding the allocation. But unlike other revenue committees in our city, the mayor's office does have the authority to make amendments. The first members of the STD TAC were seated in the latter half of 2017, and the committee began its work making recommendations to allocate the tax revenue. In the first year, the STD TAC worked quickly and made important strides to convene, establish internal processes, and propose the path forward in a landmark, unprecedented endeavor. What is most amazing was the energy, time, and dedication of the DPH staff and committee members to meet and quickly organize to move this new effort forward. The committee met regularly and deftly navigated the intricacies of City Hall and the budgetary constraints and needs of several partner agencies, while also keeping an eye towards the larger public health goal of reducing the consumption of sugary drinks and the citywide levels of type 2 diabetes, obesity, and tooth decay. I was appointed to the STD TAC in the second cycle, by the Rules Committee after being nominated by Supervisor Shimon Walton. I was honored to represent the AAPI community and report back to the API Health Parity Council. I'm joined on today's call by fellow SDD TAC members, past and present, and Jessica Ho from the API Council. A central challenge was to define metrics by which to determine revenue allocations, envisioning the path forward from funding a program to achieving measurable outcomes in public health through implementation science is a really daunting task, especially across the diverse population of over 700,000 residents across the 49 square miles of San Francisco. With regard to the next steps for the Medical Society, as I look back on the 5 years since implementation, the following reflections of the successes that we should celebrate. First, it's in the transformation of grocery and convenience store shelves across San Francisco with new options to purchase a range of water, zero-calorie, and low-calorie drinks that will be the enduring legacy. Our message about the health hazards of added sugars was heard by consumers, retailers, and most importantly, the industry, who rapidly redesigned their products in response to public opinion. Second, the global action following the Bay Area soda taxes has been majestic. Over 50 nations to date now tax sugar-sweetened beverages. After the success in 2016 in the Bay Area, the United Kingdom, South Africa, Portugal, Bermuda, Estonia, Fiji, France, India, Ireland, Malaysia, the Maldives, Morocco, New Caledonia, Nigeria, Peru, Panama, Philippines, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Spain, Sri Lanka, Thailand, and the UAE have all implemented soda taxes. A global movement was catalyzed from the 4 Bay Area soda taxes that will provide the scientific base to support future public policy actions back here in the United States. And finally, the foundation for the next phase of sugary drink legislation in America is poised for action. The CMA has proposed a statewide soda tax, along with legislation to create a soda warning label, curb supersized drinks, increase education, and stop big soda's marketing schemes, and thereby improve health outcomes for all Californians. We particularly applaud Senator Wiener's ongoing efforts to overturn preemption in California. I'd like to finish, as we hear from the other presenters today, I ask the listeners to keep these 3 questions in mind. Where do we go from here? What comes next? What original goals remain unfulfilled, yet to be completed? And finally, what are the valuable lessons that we have learned? Again, thank you for the wonderful opportunity to participate in today's panel. I'd like to turn it back over to Dr. Roberto. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ma. And I want to also reflect on all the photos that we see in the beginning of our webinar. We were rotating a lot of photos. So reflecting on the current photos that we have here, again, with Senator Wiener, Dr. Ma, and just again, these reminders of what we have fought for and what we are currently fighting for to protect the health and wellness of all of us. So we look forward to our Q&A with you, Dr. Ma, but we will keep our program moving forward. So next, again, it's my honor and pleasure to welcome our next panelist, Roberto Vargas. Roberto, in the fight to pass a soda tax in San Francisco, Roberto helped convene UCSF experts, local policymakers, and community leaders to shape sugary sweetened beverage and water policy and investment in his work for the UCSF Clinical and Translational Science Institute. Roberto also served on the inaugural Sugary Drinks Distributor Tax Advisory Committee and as co-chair for 2 terms. As a private citizen, Roberto organized support for a soda tax with community leaders and debated representatives of the American Beverage Association for local endorsements. Given his many roles leading up to and following the passage of the soda tax, Roberto will share some lessons learned. Welcome, Roberto.
Thank you so much, Abby, and thanks for your service on the SDD TAC, and thanks to all our colleagues at Shape Up, the American Heart Association, and Department of Public Health for putting this together. I really appreciate all the context and insight we're getting from our colleagues here on the panel. In just a few minutes, I wanted to share some lessons learned for me from that process. So to begin with, I work at the Clinical and Translational Science Institute at UCSF and the Center for Community Engagement at UCSF. And part of our work is to help be a bridge between UCSF and the broader community, and to look for opportunities to leverage the science and expertise that exists at UCSF to strengthen community-based approaches to public health, to strengthen the formation of health policy that is evidence-based and informed by the latest science. And then also to strengthen the capacity of our institution to address public health, individual health, community health, by leveraging the expertise that exists in community. And that was what led me to this work. We saw in our work as the San Francisco Health Improvement Partnership, made up between UCSF, Department of Public Health, and many community leaders from Baby Hunters Point, the Tenderloin, Mission District, and elsewhere. We saw that of the priority health issues that were impacting San Franciscans, chronic disease contributed to a number of diseases that contributed to the greatest number of years of life lost for San Franciscans, okay? And so that led us to take a look at what we could do together in coalition by way of collective impact to reduce the impacts of all these toxins in our communities. And sugary drinks in that moment, about a decade ago, was becoming of great concern to public health advocates and scientists across the nation. And similarly at UCSF, where we saw a great increase, for example, in the need for liver transplant for folks impacted by non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So Dr. Laura Schmidt was one of the folks that was really advocating that we take a look at policy levers to reduce consumption of sugary drinks. And she really advocated for a soda tax early on in this process of us coming together to see what we could do together. She, along with Change Lab Solutions, Rudd Center, and other scientists at UCSF, helped to provide insight into what the research shows to be most effective by way of policy approaches toward reducing consumption of products that are harmful to health. But it took several years. You know, I did learn from this process that timing is important when it comes to policy change. And so, for example, when our elected officials are in their second terms as supervisors on the Board of Supervisors, for example, they're much more interested in taking a look at policy that impacts citywide and beyond, and not just looking at the districts that they represent. And so we were able to engage a couple of policymakers in their later terms who were interested in the potential for a soda tax. And as we engaged in that, you know, and it became a ballot issue, some of us at UCSF were asked to then step back, right? Well, all of us were asked actually by UCSF Legal. And so I learned from that step in the process that for those of us who are employed by publicly funded institutions, you know, there are some limitations to engaging in the democratic process. Now, we can all engage, and so I want to encourage everyone to engage in democracy in all the ways that are open to us. I think we can and should engage in the democratic process. And for many of us, what it meant in that moment when this soda tax policy was becoming a ballot measure, or even months before that, we had to advocate on our own time as individuals. And that's what we did. That's what I did. That's what many of my colleagues did. We learned also from our community-based participatory research in partnership with leaders from Baby Hunters Point, Rafiki Coalition, Instituto Familiar de la Raza in the Mission District, Central American Resource Center in the Mission, Vietnamese Youth Development Center in the Tenderloin. In our partnership with them, we researched community perspectives on policy. As I mentioned earlier, we learned what types of policy folks were willing to support. And they were willing to support on a tax on manufacturers and distributors but they did not want to see a tax on corner store retailers or consumers. They identified with the corner store retailers as their friends, people who sometimes extended credit to them. And, you know, many of these communities are living in poverty and also, you know, in one of the most expensive regions in the world. They did not want to see the cost of anything in their lives be increased. So, you know, we did hear from them, though. Once again, they were willing to see a tax on manufacturers and distributors. So it's important to remember this is not a tax, the soda tax on consumers. It is on distributors, and sometimes it is passed on, sometimes it is not. We also learned folks wanted and needed access to trusted source of public drinking water. And so we then began activating to make sure that folks had access to bottle filling stations in their communities. And we partnered with then Supervisor Eric Marr and others, folks at the PUC, to make sure that people had access to those public drinking water stations in their communities. We had students, learners, medical students from UCSF, from the PRIME program, activate into communities to gather perspectives from community about where they wanted to see those stations and what kinds of information they wanted to be available to them about why they should trust public drinking water. You know, a lot of folks don't know that public drinking water is much safer than bottled water, much more affordable, much less likely to be contaminated, and tested many more times. So I really want to encourage folks to drink public water, encourage our elected officials and others to continue investing in access for public drinking water. And we know that in particular, homeless folks in San Francisco do still experience tremendous challenges in accessing public drinking water. So some work to be done there, certainly. Other things that remain a challenge, I think, are engaging youth leadership in meaningful ways at the Soda Tax Advisory. We've had some very powerful participation from youth, but mostly not from youth from impacted communities. It's very difficult from youth from impacted communities to participate in those ways without compensation, without getting paid. Many of those young people, their families depend on them to help contribute to the economics of their family. We should structure compensation for youth, engage existing groups of youth leaders in impacted communities, rather than relying on one individual young person to represent on the Soda Tax Committee. So I think that's a policy opportunity for reshaping what the soda tax looks like in the future. And another opportunity is around the inequity between community seats versus city-appointed representative seats. So folks representing community have to reapply every 2 years. Folks representing city departments do not have to reapply. And so I think over time, you know, that represents a challenge to having community power and community voice when these community folks are new every couple of years. And we've also seen challenges for community reps remaining engaged on a regular basis. You know, many community folks working in community-based organizations are challenged to simply meet the needs of the folks that they're serving by way of those community-based organizations. So there's still that need for community leaders in impacted communities to step up and be willing to serve and apply to sit on the Soda Tax Committee. And we also encourage folks from impacted communities to remain engaged in the Soda Tax Committee process. Show up to the meetings, find out what's going on, share your voice about what's needed. You know, the UCSF reps, including Abby Cabrera, have worked to bridge science and community, leveraging evidence-based approaches and data, while joining with our community colleagues to try to keep community needs, interests, and voice centered. And so I want to encourage all my colleagues on the Soda Tax Committee to continue doing that. Rely on your networks of expertise, rely on your expertise for the seat that you serve in, and really share what you think is best and not what you think the mayor of any particular political moment wants to hear, because the mayor ultimately will have the opportunity to make budget recommendations as they see fit. This is not about any individual mayor. At this point, we've already, as a soda tax committee, seen folks serve under several mayors. And so, I think the guidance that I'd like to share remains consistent, that the soda tax committee should continue as they have, remaining based in the expertise that they have, based on the jobs, the roles that they serve in, and then relying on the science and the data as best as possible. And thankfully, our UCSF representatives and other folks in those medical research seats have continued to bring that to bear. So thank you for this opportunity to share. And remember that at UCSF Center for Community Engagement and at the Community Engagement and RAGE programs of UCSF's Clinical and Translational Science Institute, at the IMPACT program at CTSI, we can still be a bridge for you. We can provide consultation when folks ask for consultations, to leverage our scientists to help you in your work doing community health, or to leverage toward helping policymakers to shape policy that is influenced by the evidence. Reach out to us if you'd like that kind of support and consultation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roberto. Pleasure having you on. Next, we will hear from Dr. Susan Phillip. Dr. Phillip is the health officer for the City and County of San Francisco. As health officer, her focus is to support all communities to have equal opportunities for optimal health during and beyond the pandemic. In May of 2022, she became the director of the Population Health Division of San Francisco Department of Public Health. In this role, she's been engaged and actively supportive of the soda tax. She presented at the closing celebration for the first cohort of Healthy Communities grantees in May, and recently spoke at the community celebration for the 5-year anniversary at Florence Fang Community Farm. This morning, she attended a celebration and addressed high school students at the June Jordan School for Equity. Welcome, Dr. Phillip.
Thank you so much. I am so honored to be here on this with the esteemed the other panelists and talking on this really happy occasion. And yes, it has also been a great privilege over the past few days to personally see the impact and the benefit of the work that has happened as a result of implementing, passing and then implementing and following through on the soda tax. So really, really happy to be here with you all. I'm going to walk through some slides to share some data and some visualizations with you all. So maybe I'll ask for the next slide, please. Thank you. And so we are so fortunate in San Francisco to work with Ramey and Associates to evaluate the impact of the work. And I thank them for the work that they've done on these slides to really distill the core values and the core work that the policymakers that thought of the tax in the first place, the advisory committee, and our DPH colleagues and leaders here have really put into thinking about how the tax is going to benefit San Francisco and counteract the harms that we've already heard about come about by ingesting sugary drinks and beverages. So over the past 5 years, the investments, it's very important that they are going to the priority populations and the communities that have been most targeted. That is a core principle. And I'm sharing some of the evaluation findings from 22 to 23. Over the past 5 years, investments from the soda tax have included structural and systemic changes in access to healthy food and oral health treatment. Again, emphasizing those occurring in the communities that have been most impacted. And over the past 5 years, SDDT investments have improved cultural norms related to water sugary drinks and fruit and vegetable consumption. These investments also, really importantly, are increasing economic opportunities among the people and places most impacted by diet-sensitive chronic diseases worsened by sugary drinks. Next slide, please. And the tax has been very successful. So, the planners and the implementers are really have resources as a result of this tax approved by the people in San Francisco to work with and to try and counter the ill effects on health and our economies. over $72 million have been raised in revenue since the tax was implemented. And let's go to the next slide and look exactly at where and how these funds are being utilized to improve health and the strength of our economies and our communities in San Francisco. As I mentioned before, the funding very appropriately is focusing on priority neighborhoods. So the map on the left of San Francisco shows in darkest blue the neighborhoods that are most impacted by diet-sensitive chronic diseases, diabetes, tooth decay, and others. The deeper blue indicates the priority neighborhoods for the funding, matching up to the areas that are most impacted by the ill health effects of sugary beverages. If you look at the map on the right, this is where funded organizations are located, or where the services are taking place, where vouchers are being distributed or used, or structural improvements like hydration stations that we just talked about, or school kitchen upgrades are happening. And I think we can appreciate that if you overlay these maps, we find that the funding and the opportunities for utilizing the benefits derived from the tax really overlay the communities and the neighborhoods that have been most impacted over time. And it's wonderful that that is happening by design and that those investments are going to the right places. So let's talk a little bit more on the next slide about how the allocations have occurred over time. The majority of funding, as you see here, is being allocated to nutrition security and physical activity programming services. Again, to directly counter the ill effects of sugary beverages within our communities and the proliferation of those types of beverages. And then in the pie chart, in terms of intervention types, the pie chart shows that the SDDT has funded a variety of interventions, programs, and services to the tune of $29.3 million, and policies and system change to the tune of $22.4 million over time. So really, really wonderful. Again, as we have heard earlier today by this amazing panel, what an idea grounded in science and public health, coupled with political will, community advocacy can do to really garner resources in such an innovative way that becomes a leader throughout the country and worldwide. Can we go to the next slide and focus here on who participates in these funded programs through the SDDT? Well, the investments are increasing, as we mentioned, economic opportunities among the people and places that are most impacted by diet-sensitive chronic diseases. The number of unduplicated participants, as we see here in these SDDT funded programs, has increased year over year. And of these approximately 73,000 people, 60% of those in SDD funded programs who participate are Black, Indigenous, or other people of color. And that is really, really a wonderful testament, again, to the deliberate way in which these resources, these new and additional and valued resources, are really meant to deliberately benefit communities that have been most targeted by the soda industry and the sugary beverage industry. Can we go to the next slide to talk even further about direct economic benefit? So the SDDT investments are paying people, paying people's wages in order to do this important work. So it is definitely a win-win-win. It's increasing economic opportunities among the people and places that are most impacted by diet-sensitive chronic diseases. And economic increases in economic opportunity and stability are a result. So if you see just a couple of the highlights that are bulleted here, 86% of the organizations that are funded through SDDT paid promotores or community health workers with those funds, which is fantastic. 70 to 89% of people paid with these funds in each of the last 5 years are BIPOC as well. All right, next slide, please. So as you can see, the SDDT has been both mitigating the health inequities caused by sugary beverages themselves and creating healthy communities in multiple ways. Economic health contributes to physical health and vice versa. And these are intertwined and really important. In addition to helping low-income residents to stretch their household budget and access healthy produce, the Healthy Food Purchasing Supplement, or HFPS programs, have had a significant impact on the local economy. Dozens of small business owners and farmers who are mostly BIPOC have been able to secure economic stability by relying on the steady stream of sales in fruits and vegetables from the SDDT-funded Vouchers for Veggies and Market Match programs. In fiscal year 22-23, SDDT generated $2.2 million in direct sales of fruits and vegetables for BIPOC small business owners. So again, I want to thank you all for the opportunity to participate in this really important panel. It has been so wonderful to celebrate a success in public health. And thank you again to all who made it possible to happen. And with that, I will turn it back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Phillip. I think you did a wonderful job, again, highlighting the work. A lot of times, some individuals and community members ask, how is this helping? What's going on? And I think you were able to really convey to us a lot of the great work of how the revenue is going back into the community. And so with that, I would like to next transition us to our presenter. So it's, again, my pleasure to introduce to you all Vanessa Bohm. Vanessa is the director of CARECEN's San Francisco Family Wellness and Health Promotion Programs. Vanessa served 3 terms in the Health Equity seat, representing the Latinx population on the Sugary Drinks Distributor Tax Advisory Committee. During her tenure, she co-led the Community Input Subcommittee. And Vanessa today brings a unique experience and will share with us her organization as a recipient of Sugary Drinks Distributor tax funding to lead the Mission Oral Health Task Force and to do a policy and systems change work. Welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you, Abby. It's a pleasure to be with you all today and be invited to speak on this panel. Just hearing all the reflections make me super excited and proud to have been part of this work these last 5 years. So just excited to be here with all of you. So I wanted to share a little bit from a community perspective what we've learned from the soda tax over these past 5 years. One thing I did want to highlight is how intentional we were about incorporating and gathering community voices to prepare or come up with the first round of recommendations. I think the Soda Tax Advisory Committee and the Department of Public Health and all of those who were working on this did town hall meetings, got information from many diverse community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, coalitions, advocacy groups to really understand what were the priorities of community members and helped and took that information and put that into the recommendations that we developed. I think one of the major successes from a community perspective was that the majority of funding was designated to support community-based programming, prevention programming, that target communities most affected by the consumption of sugary drinks and chronic disease. So I just really want to lift that up. And we also identified through that process values that community members had for how soda tax funding should be used. And Dr. Susan Phillips highlighted some of those. And I'm so proud that we were able to identify those and include those in what is the vision for what should be supported with soda tax dollars. I think something that we've learned over these years is that soda tax funding really has become an important and potentially sustainable source of funding for many organizations and institutions who have been doing health equity work for some time in San Francisco, folks that have been doing really meaningful work that's culturally relevant, that is linguistically responsive to the communities we serve. But over the years, it has been challenging to consistently fund programming because of inconsistent funding. So the soda tax funding really has helped add a new source of funding to support wonderful programs that are really essentially reaching hard to reach populations, working with folks that are under-resourced, who may be experiencing a lot of isolation. We certainly saw that through COVID. I think everybody was isolated, and there were other communities that were much more isolated than others. But unfamiliar with navigating big institutions and ultimately working with populations that face barriers accessing healthcare services more broadly. And through the soda tax funding, we've really been able to invest in a community-based programming that is focused on prevention, but is really creative and innovative, engaging with community members. We're funding things like health education and information for community members, fun opportunities to engage in physical activity. We are funding a diverse, slew of classes, health and wellness classes to support community members. We're creating opportunities for community members to connect to nature, to support traditional healing practices. But I think most importantly, we're also creating spaces for community members to create networks of support that will help them in this journey to create healthy lifestyles, et cetera, that address chronic disease. And essentially these programs are really tailoring their services to the unique populations that they serve. And one way that many programs are doing that, and we saw that in the slides that Dr. Susan Phillips just showed us, is that a lot of programs are using peer-led efforts, community health worker, promotora de salud models to more effectively connect with and engage community members. And that's because they're part of the communities that they serve. They speak the language. They understand the barriers and motivations that lead to healthy health changes. It's easier for them to connect and communicate with community members. And CARECEN SF, the Central American Resource Center, is an example of an organization that has used soda tax funding to support promotora-led health equity efforts. We do receive soda tax funding to support the Mission Latinx Children's Oral Health Task Force. It's one of 3 task forces in San Francisco that were created to address the disproportionate rates of childhood cavities in the Latinx, African American, and Chinese communities. And soda tax dollars, we use soda tax dollars to support our promotora team, who do essential outreach and education in Spanish to increase awareness around childhood cavities, who make the connection between the role of sugar-sweetened beverages in contributing to the development of cavities, the importance of oral hygiene, but also the importance of consuming water as an alternative. Promotores are also an integral part of gathering community input, informing strategies, creating creative campaigns to improve oral health, as well as strengthen larger citywide strategies to address the disproportionate rates of childhood cavities in the Latinx community. The other, I think, highlight or success of soda tax funding has been that we have designated a portion of soda tax funding to support community-driven policy systems and environmental change. CARECEN also has gotten funding to do PSC work, and we've used funding to do a community assessment to better understand and identify areas in which community members feel are important to reducing SSBs, but also to identify community health priorities. And in this journey, we've learned that it has been an important opportunity for community to really be involved in creating solutions that will improve their health, their family's health, their community's health, but from a systems environmental level. It's been an opportunity for community members to learn about the systems that affect their day-to-day lives. Who are the folks in charge? Who are the people and the groups that make decisions? And how do you work within that system to really create change and have an impact on their health in a different but very important ways? We've also seen that this funding has been an important opportunity to develop new community leadership, to build capacity so that we can continue this kind of PSC work. As we all know, it takes time to achieve policy systems, environmental change work. But the last thing I want to say, I think that it's also been extremely important in empowering community members. Some of the feedback that we've received from community via doing a PSC work is that they feel seen. They feel like they're being heard, that they have a voice, that they feel more confident in engaging in PSC work, in advocating for structural changes, systems changes, environmental changes. And that's important for the communities that we work with, that oftentimes are the most marginalized, feel left out, isolated from being part of making kind of larger level systemic changes that affect their daily lives. So I just wanted to share that. I'm not sure if I went over in time. There's lots of things that I'd love to share about it, but hopefully through the question and answer, we can have a deeper discussion about the lessons learned, etc.
Thank you so much, Vanessa, and you were great on time, so no need to worry. Next, I would like to offer the stage to Lolis. Lolis Ramirez has been a longtime advocate for soda taxes in her various roles at the TOLA Organizing Academy. Lolis played a crucial role in grassroots organizing and electoral campaign strategy and community building for various Bay Area soda taxes. In her current role as the director of field programs at In-Advancce, a nonprofit in Oakland, Lolis is leading conversations about the future of regional soda taxes and supporting Oakland residents in community organizing and advocacy to advance racial and economic justice. In her current capacity, we'll hear about the future of regional soda taxes. Welcome, Lolis.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Honestly, just want to take a moment to appreciate this moment in time with an amazing celebration of success for the San Francisco soda tax. This is something that was begun, as Senator Wiener mentioned, from way back in 2012 and 2013, and here we are in 2023 celebrating success for a true investment in community. And so what a unique moment in time to be here. I want to say thank you for allowing me the opportunity to sit amongst this amazing panel. Just so happy to be here. All that has been mentioned has been so informative, and it brings back many memories of how health policy experts and community and political leaders came together with an amazing vision. And here we are celebrating that vision coming into full effect. I played a key role in the success of passing this. I was sort of the liaison between political consultants and funders, and then the community-based organizing that was happening, the endorsement process, of which I remember Roberto battling and, you know, being in some of those endorsement meeting stages, just having conversations against the American Beverage Association and just, you know, really calling them out. And so all of this make me really, really happy. I can't see who's on today, but if you were someone during the 2014 or 2016 campaign who knocked on a door, who made a phone call, who showed up to a mobilization, who had a sign on your door, who kept some of the mail that we were sending, I just wanted to say thank you. I don't know who you are if you're out there watching us, but there was a lot of people, blood, sweat, tears, that went into these campaigns passing. And I just wanted to take a quick moment to say thank you so much. So now I'll get to the part that I'm actually supposed to be speaking about. There is a very unique opportunity in overturning preemption at the state level. I know Senator Wiener mentioned it's going to be a tough battle legislatively, but we are at a point in time where earlier this year, as has been mentioned, a penalty provision was lifted. And so what does that mean? That means that when the American Beverage Association passed AB 1838, which is the initial preemption lawsuit, there was a penalty provision that if any city attempted to and or passed a soda tax, they would lose access to their revenues, their sales tax revenues. And imagine what that would do to a city, right? Especially a city who needs that type of funding. Well, in April of this year, the state of California ruled that penalty as unconstitutional. So that's huge, because now that means that any city, any jurisdiction, it has to be a charter city, could potentially put a soda tax on the ballot, win, and challenge preemption at the state level. So that is huge. That is the moment in time that we are in. And so with that, we are looking forward to working with potentially jurisdictions that have an existing soda tax, who want to strengthen, who want to amend those policies that currently exist. We are also working and looking for opportunities to work with other charter cities who don't have a soda tax, but would like to pursue in the footsteps of San Francisco and invest this public health policy into their community. And so that is the unique opportunity that we are in. That is an effort that is growing right now. We're in conversation around that. But things that we're needing to consider, right? If you are a city that has an existing soda tax, how would you amend it? For opportunities in looking at new soda tax opportunities, would you designate? You know, we talked about how in 2014, San Francisco was aiming to directly invest the soda tax funding to specific programs. Could we do that now for a new city, or go back to an existing city and say, now we want to designate? How would you change the panel of experts or the CAB, the Community Advisory Board? You know, how would you strengthen this? Some of the soda tax that have passed in the Bay Area are set to sunset. That means they're likely to end after 10, 12 years. And so could a renewal be in play? So we are at a point where we're having deep conversations. We are having, you know, those eager and emotional battles around what does a policy look like, but really inviting the opportunity to have this space, to have the conversation with folks. And I cannot say enough how amazing it has been to follow the story of San Francisco, from a health policy idea to passing it and battling the industry, to now seeing it into effect. I mean, I think I was taken aback by the maps that Dr. Phillips was showing around, here's the need, and you superimpose the other map of where it's been invested, and it's going to the right places. And so following the success of San Francisco, would really like to see other jurisdictions pursue amending their existing tax, strengthening the policy, and for those that do not have a tax or a policy in place, really make it into something that's meaningful, that will have a positive impact, and that we can all win towards. I will say, you know, at the end of the day, this is still a battle against a multi-billion-dollar industry, and we have to be prepared for that. And so just as much as this is a unique, wonderful opportunity with the penalty provision being lifted and positive conversations taking place around strengthening existing policies or reshaping new ones, we have to be mindful of who it is that we are up against. And so we can have a whole different panel conversation around those tactics, but I will say it will come. It will come, and we should be prepared. But given the success and the history and the grit of all of you out there, I think we can be successful yet again, and hopefully put something on the ballot, be successful, and ultimately challenge preemption at the state level in California. Very, very hopeful for all of that. So I'll pause there. I think I'm short on time, but I'll see if there's any questions that I can take from anyone.
Thanks, Lolis. We'll move into the full panel Q&A. So now is the time where I invite our attendees to enter any questions that you have for any of our panelists in the Q&A box in the Zoom webinar. It's down at the bottom of your screen. And while you enter those questions, I'll invite the rest of my panel to come on to video, and we can answer some questions while we wait for the attendee questions to come in. So one thing that I'd like to ask of all of our panelists, maybe we can do a popcorn here on the question, is in the spirit of celebration, after everything that we've talked about today, what is one element that you would like to lift up in today's celebration of the current tax? Maybe we can start with Lolis since you were just on.
Yeah, thank you. I think I said this earlier, but I think for me personally, we get so caught up in passing a political campaign or just getting kind of, you get tunnel vision when you're in the moment of, you need this speaker, you need that person, you need to go and knock on X many doors, and you need to talk to this person and that person. And so you forget to step back and really see what the goal was. And truthfully for me was seeing the map that Dr. Phillip put up on the investment. You know, there's a real need, and here's this policy that we passed, we hope would work, and here it is working. And so just want to lift that up, that San Francisco and the tax advisory board and everyone that has been working on this, just thank you so much for making this a reality and being an example for everyone else. It's truly an honor to sit here 5 years later and say, wow, we did that together and we're helping everyone. So thank you again. You want a popcorn?
Sure.
Okay, I'll Dr. Ma, you're already off mute, so go for it.
Thank you so much, Lolis. I really think of all the great memories of Mayor Edley and all of his important contributions, and this is his legacy, and just so proud of all the progress that's been made, you know, and the intent, all the steps forward. I think we're just on this amazing foundation, you know, to again, I hope partnering with other nations, you know, to gather the data and science of their successes and to really identify the next steps forward. I think we're poised to really make a huge impact over the next decades, and really in Mayor Edley's honor. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ma. I'd invite Roberto if you have an answer for this.
Thank you. You know, I think what's most gratifying for me is to see that the investments are going to the most impacted communities. That was something that folks in those communities were skeptical about. You know, I'm born and raised in the Mission District in San Francisco, lived half my life in Bayview, and was living in the Bayview when we were working on those two campaigns. And folks in those communities were mistrustful that government institutions would reinvest in their communities, right? And we heard that often, you know, how can we as poor folks work to advance a tax that is likely to make our lives more expensive, right? And so what we really worked to do was to help folks to understand that diabetes is very expensive, right? Having a heart attack is really expensive. All the different health impacts of these toxic products are expensive to deal with, right? And so we really wanted to help folks understand that making a toxic product accessible and cheap was not doing anybody any favors, and in particular, poor folks who are most impacted, right? And least prepared to invest in their medical care and all the things that are needed to mitigate the health impacts that we know these products that cause. So, you know, Dean Schillinger the other day pointed out that these maps that we've all seen, they overlay onto, when we made these maps, it was really important to help visualize that data for folks in communities so that they saw their communities were disproportionately burdened by heart disease, diabetes, stroke, and all those things. So it really did communicate to them that, yes, this is something that we should be concerned about in these communities. And one thing Dean pointed out the other day was he also noticed that these overlaid neatly with redlining maps of San Francisco, right? Those redlining maps really structured inequity, structured disadvantage for those communities many, many years ago. And so for me, what's particularly gratifying is to know that we are now structuring mitigation of that historical harm. We are structuring advantage in a way that helps those communities try to recover from those decades of structured disadvantage, structured inequity, structured injustice. And so in many ways, the soda taxes are policies that function in getting to health equity, getting to health justice. And so that's really important to me and something really gratifying to see that all of you who've served on the SDD tag have continued to promote in San Francisco.
Thank you, Roberto. And I'll ask Vanessa the same question in terms of if there's one piece that you would lift up and celebrate out of the current tax iteration, what would that be?
I mean, I think I echo what everybody else has said, but I am so proud of how community has been invested in this process and has been a part of the process from the very beginning. And I hope that really is the case moving forward, because I think that is what has really led to programs matching up with the places that are impacted most by sugary drinks and chronic disease. And so I think I am just amazed at how community showed up, continues to show up, and hopefully will show up in order for this tax to be just as successful as it's been in the last 5 years.
Wonderful, thank you. And we can go to a question we have from one of our attendees. For cities and counties without a current tax, but potentially interested in considering, what do you think would need to be in place to create successful campaigns? Is it coalition, elected champions, or community, or their community lost momentum after the state preemption and they're looking to pick it back up again? I'll open that up for anyone that's interested in their take on that answer.
I can take an initial stab, and then Roberto, you want to chime in here, Dr. Ma? I think these are, we're talking about a celebration here, but if you think back about how this all started, it was a long, grueling conversation. I mean, just started as a conversation, because part of this is what is so unique about your community and how would a unique policy work for and benefit your community, right? Is it the types of products that you're taxing? At what amount are you taxing? So the policy is really, really important. I think our recommendation and my mentor, Larry Tramitola, who worked on helping us pass all of these measures, is really like, look at your community, and your community will know the day of the ballot box if this is really for them or not. And so if you start with community first and you start with a local coalition first, grass bottom to grass tops, right? I think you have a better chance of success. Would it hurt to have an elected champion? Absolutely not. You're going to need them anyway, right? But truly, this needs to come from the community for the community, because, there's other cities that we haven't talked about that have been mentioned, but we haven't talked about how their implementation hasn't gone as successfully, right? And so the community is really struggling to bring that forward. And here in San Francisco, because there was a Roberto, a John Ma, there was other folks in the room, they knew their community and they knew what was going to pass, and they knew what was going to be useful against an industry that was a multi-billion-dollar industry. So I'd start there. Look at your community, write a policy that's reflective and can benefit your community, and then begin piecing together the other parts of it all. I'm happy to, share my contact information if folks want to get involved and talk more about that. But that would be my initial response. And Roberto, John Ma, either of you want to add to that?
I completely agree with you, Lolis. I would add some thoughts. We forgot to mention our great benefactor, Michael Bloomberg, and his support. I think that's vital I think any city trying to pass a soda tax now, we've had this pause for the last several years. And so building that momentum, the other key piece of advice in watching these movements, every time a city tried on their own, they were defeated. It's when multiple cities joined together, when Albany, Berkeley went first, but it's the ability to have multiple cities, particularly in a single media market, to join. And that's a very powerful coalition. But really, to answer the question, I think given the interval, I think it's going to be essential to have great science, great policy, great community organizations, elected official champions, organizations like the American Heart Association, if it's in California, the California Medical Association would be very interested to join, but you're really going to have to build a really robust and strong team. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both. Thank you, Blythe. We at UCSF continue to provide consultations the same way we did for San Francisco and have since for many other cities and other countries. So that means bringing our scientists to the table to speak about their expertise relative to the research they've done, which policies will have the greatest impact in a particular situation. And then, of course, you've got to, as folks have said, tap into local communities, and local communities can help inform the policy process about what's feasible, for your particular community. But we can, and similar to Lolis, I'm willing to share my contact information. You can Google me, get a hold of me. We can provide a free consultation to folks to bring those experts to the table to provide you some advising. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. One piece I'd like to add to this answer is, and I think, Roberto, you started to touch on this, is the partnership between community, public health, and academics. Part of the 5-year celebration that also occurred within the last week was the grand rounds at UCSF, where a lot of the public health impacts were discussed, a lot of research was discussed, and we can make sure that we have a link if there's a recording for that. I know Marin, who's backboning this, will have that information, but wanted to call that out as I think the intersection of those three is really crucial, along with the community piece for a successful campaign. And there is a recording, and we'll share that in the follow-up.
Thank you. And you're reminding me, we have a published article that a number of us collectively wrote to document our process. And so take a look at that article to learn more in depth about the process we went through together in San Francisco.
Great. So we also have I think, Dr. Ma, you'd like to add to an earlier question that was asked by Nicole Cox about the legal action and the comparison to the master settlement in tobacco. If you remember, we asked this of Senator Wiener, but we're bringing it back.
Thank you so much. I think that's a really interesting question. That really the master settlement was the major event in the history of tobacco control, where I've spent a lot of time, thanks to the American Heart Association. To answer the question, I believe that the soda industry has been largely undefeated in the courts, in all of the challenges at the 9th District. And so really, I just wanted to share, my mentor is Jeffrey Wigand, the famous tobacco industry whistleblower, who shared information about the practices and tactics of the tobacco industry. And to answer the question, I think it would take something akin to that, some type of information that could be used to be the source of a complaint against the soda industry. I don't think we have it at this time. I think that their legal defense is very strong about their right to sell these products. And so I don't see us being at this time. Thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Ma. Next, I want to move us into sort of a discussion on key messaging around the soda taxes and how we can continue to share out the success. And I'll link it to a question we have from one of our attendees, which is, do all of the panelists agree that community-based modes and models of health education on this topic should be increased in the next level of this mission? My interpretation is, as we continue moving forward in the next 5 years, what are the elements of health education that you would lift up to ensure that the soda tax continues to be a success and that the community continues to understand the benefit of the tax?
Yeah, I know in San Francisco, our partnership with CARECEN, Central American Resource Center, Rafiki Coalition, and Nico's Chinese Health Coalition to mobilize lay health workers to do that community-based education was really critical in shifting the conversation in those communities such that leaders began to hear from their own constituents, from the promotoras, the lay health workers, that this is an issue of importance and that they wanted to adopt organizational policies for healthy beverages, and that they wanted to support a soda tax. So that was sort of building momentum in community, building consciousness in community towards support for policy policy interventions.
I also want to shout out the question that came from Chester Williams, who's currently in the health equity seat from our Sugary Distributor Tax Advisory Committee. And I think also I wanted to highlight with that of course it's so important that the education come from the community to the community, and emphasize again the presentation by Vanessa Bohm and the Mission Oral Health Task Force. We have a task force in the Mission, we have a task force in the Bayview, and we have a task force in Chinatown that our soda tax revenue funding is helping to support. And so that's, again, just another example, but it's, one that we can draw on, and we're continuing to see the impacts. We know it takes a long time to see impacts, but 5 years later, we're really thrilled to see a lot of that. So not sure to Vanessa, if you want to highlight or draw on some of that, because your work with the task force and through CARECEN really embodies community education to the community.
Yeah, I think, I think it would be wonderful to really invest more in that kind of work, investing in lay workers. I mean, I think that type of model itself includes different priorities that community was interested in. One, that programs be community driven, but that also support community members. So a lot of these programs are either stipend based or include employment opportunities, training opportunities. And I think on that level too, and I think Dr. Phillips showed that in the slides, it's creating economic opportunities for community members as well. I think, and I'm not sure, Blythe, if you were getting to this part of the question, but we've asked community members, do they know about the soda tax? And a certain portion of the community has gotten the information about, yes, there is a distributor tax and there's soda's more expensive, but much fewer people know where the funding goes to. And so I think we have not done a good enough job of providing information and getting kind of the message out of where this revenue is going. And I think we have a lot of work to do in that area.
No, I think that's great. And I think that that's the point that definitely needs to be raised in terms of, how can we, both as the SDTAC and those of us involved with the soda tax, maybe as one step removed, message, where this money is going. I think, Dr. Phillip, you covered some of, the evidence based on the evaluation from Ramey and Associates. But I think about, how do we take that evaluation and move it to a public facing modality so that people better understand, where the monies are being spent so that they can, decide if maybe they want to be more involved with the SDTAC and the recommendations, or, maybe tell their neighbor that, this is going to fund programs in their district in San Francisco. So I'll transition to a question I have for you, Dr. Phillip, from one of our attendees, is where do you see the tax going in 5 years, given the nature of soda taxes and sort of the diminishing revenue, as well as the sunset of the existing advisory committee?
I think this is a really important question, and of course, you know, this is sort of built in. This is not a flaw; it's a design that, in a way, we want less consumption of these beverages. This is what the community is working towards. So we know this, and it's built into the structure and the planning. But the specifics of how do we pivot, what comes next, what have we accomplished? You know, building on the last conversation, I think it is really important to highlight the positives. And certainly, like politics, all public health is local. So I think I'm colored by going to the farm and going to June Jordan School this morning, but to see individual kids engaging in those activities is really important one-on-one. And we have to do larger, broader messaging, right? The people of San Francisco made this happen ultimately. And I think that they would be really pleased with how the investment has gone. So I think we need to do both, you know, to your point, Blythe, and to other leaders' points on this panel, of getting the message out so that we are best prepared and positioned for the conversation about what's next. Because I don't think the conversation is like, well, this is just ending. You know, we have to build enough advocacy and a groundswell of support that cannot be the answer, that we are compelled to do something different as public health and as leaders who are working alongside each other to do this work and alongside community.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. You know, I think one of the questions that Lolis can speak to and others on this panel is, you know, in the spirit of, you know, looking at a tax that's working in terms of over time, we've seen consumption go down. And so revenue has gone down over time for the tax that's being collected. And given that these monies go to fund really valuable and needed public health programs, you know, maybe panelists would be willing to speak to, you know, the need potentially to increase the funds. And, you know, there are various methods that could happen to increase, but given that the tax is currently at 1 cent, you know, what does the future of soda taxes look like with an increase, and how do we get there?
Yeah, I mean, I can start and folks can feel free to jump in here, but I think given that we are, as I mentioned, with this unique opportunity to penalty provision being lifted, why not dream for the stars, right? Why not think about how best to improve the existing policy here in San Francisco? You know, to Vanessa's point, more community education, more community awareness needs to be done for folks to know the investments that are really happening. But could you increase it to a penny, another penny, so 2 cents? You know, and that was something that was considered in 2014 and 2016. Is, you know, a penny brings in about 15 million. Could you double that and just bring in 30 million, right? Even though there is a bit of loss of revenue now that consumption's gone down. We just wanted to first pass the policy, and so we just went safe and did a penny. You know, now do 2, do 3. You know, let's see what the community is interested in supporting. If we are able to you know, repeal the statewide preemption, pass a new soda tax, there's no reason why you wouldn't be able to go back in 2, 4, 6 years and continue to increase and continue to modify as things are changing and adapting in this community, right? To ensure that continuous health education, continuous programming, continuous ongoing support to organizations is stable and sustainable. And it's not at the whim of a politician who is coming in and out of office every 4, 6, 8 years, whatever it is. But really it's institutionalized because the community wants it and sees it. And so really it's up to us who are maybe in this panel, in this space, to bring forth some options for community to really consider the sustained ongoing support for what's happening right now. But yeah, we have that opportunity right now. And so conversation should be happening and doing it. So yeah, thank you.
Great. I'm going to put you on the spot for 1 second longer of, you know, if a city were to go back on the ballot to try to increase the tax, you know, what are some of the benefits of potentially also moving to a designated tax? As you'll remember back in the beginning of the presentation, we mentioned that the original attempt at a soda tax in 2014 in San Francisco was to go for a set of designated funds versus a general fund tax. And at the time wasn't politically feasible, but I think there are many benefits to going that route. And obviously it's about political will, but I'm wondering, Lolis, if you can do sort of the pro-con of that change.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think with this new opportunity, I think we've all been thinking about it. You know, how do we, one way to really strengthen the existing policies is designating, or if a new city wants to pursue a soda tax, could they just first time out onto the ballot box, could we designate? And the answer is yeah. I mean, why not? We have successful stories like the one here in San Francisco where, you know, the investment is going where the need is. You know, and folks really feel that. I think the level of education needs to increase, right, especially amongst voters in the electorate, to secure that win. But if it's working, if we can make it happen, why not designate? The flip side to that is when we're designating a tax, we will need a higher voter threshold, and so you would need 66.67% of the electorate to vote yes in order for that designated tax to pass and be successful. And so politically, that's why we went the 50% plus one route. We've done it, we've passed it. We are being successful in what we promised voters and what we promised the city here in San Francisco. And I'm only speaking for San Francisco because, you know, other jurisdictions are different. But there's some real advantages for you all to consider that designation moving forward. Again, I think the way in which you designate and the pockets and where it is the money goes does need to come from the community. It needs to come from research. It needs to come from a place where you envision long-term continuous success and investment to communities that most need it. And so there is a whole nother level of research that needs to go in place. And potentially, I will say, some bargaining, right? Because at the end of the day, this also has to pass, and it also requires some support from elected officials. And so some negotiations will need to happen. But if at the root of this is community support and community investment and the desire to support and uplift the existing community members, then we can be successful.
Thank you, Lolis.
Yeah.
The next question I have is in regards to current and past SDD TAC members. So something that you have heard mention of throughout the presentation is that there's, you know, potential sunset to the SDD TAC committee coming in, I believe it's 2028. Feel free to correct me if that's not the correct year. But, you know, given the current level of funding and the diminishing revenues, you know, and the very big need for this committee to continue, you know, what do you think the sustainability plan is for the committee? And what could a layperson or public health professional or anyone who's interested in this issue do to get involved?
Yeah, thank you. I think I'd say that, you know, the democracy is not a spectator sport, and so everyone, I think, should consider this an open invitation to get involved. So reach out to your local elected official and let them know you're interested in this. Let them know that you're concerned that the San Francisco soda tax will sunset at the end of 2028 and that you'd like them to champion a renewal of the soda tax advisory. Let them know that you heard here about opportunities for strengthening the soda tax advisory committee. And I think that, you know, that's homework for all of us too. Like, we should be communicating with local electeds and making sure that they're aware of all of this. That's what it took, you know, for us to get both the 2014 and the 2016 tax was health champions, health advocates reaching out and communicating to elected officials about that need. So I think it's, you know, that's homework for all of us, right? It's something that we all need to engage in and make sure it happens.
I want to reflect in a moment. I've been very fortunate to serve on the committee since 2021 and was reappointed this past March to another 2 years, so up and through 2025. And I think it all starts with wanting to make a difference and make a change. And for me, that started with reaching out to Roberto. I knew his involvement and I wanted to learn more. And the deeper I got into the information, the more passionate I felt. And I thought, let me try and see if I apply as a current researcher at UCSF for the research and medical seat. And here I am in a second appointment. So it's to share that those who are here watching as a participant, or if you watch in a future recording, there's so many opportunities to participate. If your time doesn't fully allow, we have our meetings and we always welcome public comment. We want to hear from you and we want to take into consideration what matters, what will make an impact in your community. If you want to start small, what will make an impact for you and your family, in your neighborhood, for your school. As Roberto mentioned, we do have a youth seat. And at this time, unfortunately, we wish we could pay our youth to participate, but there's a seat at the table. If you're a parent of a child in San Francisco, we want to also welcome you to join in our conversation. So there's so many opportunities. It's very fulfilling, and it's a really great way to again come together with those with the shared vision and make a difference. It just starts with thinking to yourself, something's not right. I want to make a difference. I want to make an impact. And it's very possible. So there's so many resources and links that we shared in the chat. We have our partners from the evaluators from Ramirez Associates page had provided links. So if you're the type of person that loves looking at maps and is interactive with data, please take a look, and you can also see, again, just over the last 5 years, the different changes that have happened in community, and also identify where those gaps are so that you can come to us and say, okay, I'm noticing in this neighborhood, where is the water station? Let's make a difference and make a change. So be our partner, come and join us. All the information is out there for you. But again, it's a very welcoming community. We all have the same mission. And I think the biggest message is that this is a celebration. In the fight for passing the soda tax, a lot of times you were hearing negative messages, right, from beverage associations of what this could do and harm and negative. But 5 years later, we're here to say that we're celebrating. And I want to keep that message going, that we're celebrating and we want to celebrate even more and make more positive impact.
Thank you so much, Abby. I think now we can move on to our closing remarks today. But as we do so, please feel free to peruse the various chats that have come with links to all of the resources mentioned today, and I'll turn it over to Abby to lead us off in our closing.
Thank you, Blythe, and thank you again to all our panelists and everybody that is here in joining as a participant. This event is sort of the culminating feature of our 5-year celebration. And this week has just been a wonderful reflection of this major milestone of 5 years of implementing the soda tax. So thinking back to this past Saturday on November 4th, we kicked off the celebrations with a community event at the Florence Fang Community Farm. We invited families and community members who participated in food tasting, garden activities. We had games, giveaways, and diverse cultural celebrations that represent the priority populations of our soda tax funding supports. This past Tuesday, we had a dynamic panel of key stakeholders that reflected on the community, public health, and academic partnership that brought the soda tax to life. And this was done so as a hybrid medical grand rounds at Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital. And earlier today, we also celebrated with a youth event at the June Jordan School for Equity with sugary drink education and activities led by a soda tax grantee, Urban Sprouts. And again, culminating today with our wonderful panelists of this policy panel. We were concluding with our panel to consider the impact of the soda tax, discuss our lessons learned, and really look to the potential of our future. So I hope you're all filled with the renewed energy, just as I am. And I want to encourage everybody to engage in conversation with our Soda Tax Distributor Tax Advisory Committee. Join in our virtual meetings every third Wednesdays at 5 p.m. And as I've been mentioning, please give your public comment. We want to also encourage you to advocate for support of our recommendations. And lastly, as part of the evaluation of the San Francisco soda tax, Ramey and Associates developed a series of interactive maps and data dashboards that track information related to funded entities and allocated resources over time. We'll drop the links in the chat, but please visit sodatax-sf.org. View the policy in action. There are resources available, all the data. So for those who are interested in having your city engage in a soda tax and want to look to references and resources and data, we welcome you to visit our website. And I want to thank my co-host Blythe, the backbone staff from the San Francisco Department of Public Health, and to each of you for your time. And I'll pass this back to Blythe.
Thanks, Abby. I want to extend a deep thank you right back at you for being my co-host here today, and also echo the support for SFDPH and SFDPH members, without whom the webinar would not be possible. It's all of your great work that really brought us here today. I also want to thank all of our attendees who tuned in today, brought your insights into the conversation through the Q&A. The recording will be posted on the SFDPH website, and I hope that we've imparted that there is so much to celebrate, as well as many lessons learned from the current iteration of the San Francisco soda tax. As the tax moves into its next 5 years, I hope you feel inspired to get involved with the SFDPH or consider joining the conversation of operationalizing all that we've learned and from the current iteration of the tax. I'm available, as well as Lolis, if you have questions about starting the next steps in your community with the soda tax. So cheers to the future of soda taxes and all that we've accomplished over the last 5 years. Thank you everyone for attending.